in full glare of international publicity because of what his behaviour had been in the past, which was apparently very well known to a very large number of people who should not have supported his appointment in the first place.
Well, the right honourable gentleman is exactly right, and we will come to a number of circumstances where information was available which should have been acted upon and wasn't. And this was not as hard as some may try to portray. After all, the appointment did not come as a surprise. I mean, Lord Mandelson himself was clearly campaigning to become the ambassador after he failed to win the chancellorship of Oxford University. I think that somebody told me that he's actually campaigning whilst he was running that campaign. So he was after two jobs, not one. So it was clear early that that he was going to attempt to do this, and there was widespread discussion at the time about his suitability for the role, and therefore there was plenty of time for a preliminary investigative or vetting process. There was and is vast amounts of data in the public domain.
Yep.
Most of what I'm going to speak of today is public domain material. I'll explain when it's not, but most of it is. And what would that vetting process be looking for? Traditionally, and I speak, and a number of us on these benches, and most benches I imagine, have been through these vetting processes ourselves. What would they look for? Traditionally, they'd review the history and personality of the candidate, assessing risks. The risk of the candidate being susceptible to undue influence. Or in the extreme example, blackmail. I mean, the Russians and the Chinese collect compromat all the time. Risks of the candidate abusing or misusing the role. Risks of the candidate doing something that will cause reputational damage. Or, and some on the Labour front bench may find this difficult, rather old-fashioned perhaps, risks the candidate is too morally flawed to be given a major role in any place, which is where we may arrive in a moment. That they fail a simple ethical test. An ethical test, and I'm afraid I am old-fashioned. I view ethical tests as absolute. They're not ones you can trade off against some benefit or other. Well, in the history I'm about to detail, we see a Peter Mandelson who is easily dazzled by wealth and glamour, and who is willing to use his public position to pursue those things for himself. This was visible very early in his career, even to his friends. So when in 1998 he was sacked as a Trade and Industry Secretary for failing to declare an interest-free loan, a pretty enormous interest-free loan he'd received from Geoffrey Robinson. At that time...
Good day for a date. Bad day for kate. Maka-dandruff yan. Mag Head and Shoulders every day. Prevent dandruff and kate from coming back. So you're up to 100% dandruff-free every day. Head and Shoulders.
Flaws in Lord Mandelson's character, which frankly would normally disqualify any normal person from a job this important. But even his friends saw this. This flaw was described plainly by one of his friends back then as, and I quote, Peter was living beyond his means, pretending to be something he's not, and therefore he was beholden to people. And the important bit of that is that last phrase. He was beholden to people. And this is a characteristic that was displayed time and again as he sought to use his position to curry favour with very wealthy and very powerful people who are either current or future benefactors. Now this was repeated in 2001 when Lord Mandelson again was sacked after attempting to broker a British passport for Mr. Hinduja, a wealthy donor to the Millennium Dome project of which he was involved. And Mandelson attempted to influence the Home Office to give Mr. Hinduja a passport when Mr. Hinduja and his brother were under investigation in the Bofors weapons contract scandal. So again, a dubious reason. It was about that time, just as an aside, that his association with Epstein starts, and the infamous birthday book entries date from then. Yes.
I thank Max Wilkinson. I thank the right honourable for giving way. Does he share my concern that if the Prime Minister is to be discussing this issue with President Trump later in the week, and the Prime Minister has to have influence over President Trump for very good reasons, but if the issue of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein comes up, because President Trump is also in that birthday book, we understand, with the very infamous poem, what's the Prime Minister going to say?
Very glad to say I'm not the Prime Minister's speechwriter.
There's a vacancy. There's a vacancy. Just resign.
And all I can say is I hope it doesn't come up, because it will be undoubtedly embarrassing and diplomatically problematic for him. Now, however, we get to about 2004, and astonishingly, after being sacked twice for misdemeanors, in 2004 he's appointed by Tony Blair to be the European Trade Commissioner. He gets a third chance, as it were, at this. And as Trade Commissioner, he was criticised on numerous occasions for accepting lavish hospitality from companies whose commercial interests he was in the process of ruling on. Whether it's Microsoft or an Italian shoe producer or whatever. And this lavish hospitality, for some reason, often involves free luxury cruises. But he saw nothing wrong with this apparent compromising behaviour. He saw nothing wrong with it. And of course, in that category, and rather at the top of that category, was his association with the Russian oligarch and gangster capitalist Oleg Deripaska. Now, let's be clear who we're talking about here. Most colleagues, I'm sure, wouldn't really know much about him. So, Mr. Deripaska was the winner of the battle for control of Russian aluminium, the Russian aluminium industry, a battle in which roughly 100 people were murdered. In court reports, Interpol documents, and in American government publications, Deripaska has faced serious allegations of murder, bribery, extortion, and involvement in organised crime. This is a truly bad man. I wouldn't take
And for the case he's making, I just wonder, while he deals with the case of the influence of Russian oligarchs in British politics, whether he would opine on the suitability of British political parties accepting donations from Russians and the impact that that might have on their policies and their positions.
So David, had he been here before the last election, he would have sat in his chamber, I hope, and heard me opine on all those subjects and raise laws or prospective laws to deal with those oligarchs. Laws that sadly this government has failed to carry through on. So that's the backdrop. And in 2006, Mr. Deripaska's visa was revoked by the Americans. So Mandelson had no excuse for not knowing about this. And yet, as European Trade Commissioner, he saw fit to accept hospitality from Deripaska on multiple occasions over several years, including visiting him in Moscow, being flown by Deripaska's private jet to stay at his dacha in Siberia, and on his private yacht in the Mediterranean, all while considering whether to give Russian aluminium access to the European market. Now, Deripaska's activities were known to the British security services, and briefings were available to Mr. Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, I think Mr. Wes he was then. And so again, there is no excuse. He did this in full knowledge of who he was dealing with. Now, it was in this position that Mandelson promoted and signed off concessions to Russian aluminium companies that ultimately benefited Mr. Deripaska, or his companies, to the tune of $200 million a year. $200 million a year. And a company that was due, it didn't actually happen, but it was due to be IPO'd, it was due to be floated shortly thereafter. A $200 million change in profits tends to mean
You want great hair? May sagot right here. New Pantene Supplement Conditioner with provitamin and collagen. Smooths out the chunk easily for smoothness. It's not luck, it's Pantene.
In 2008, Mandelson was very controversially raised by Gordon Brown to the peerage and appointed as business secretary. And his contact with Epstein did not end. As Epstein was pleading guilty to child sex offences, Mandelson emailed him. I think the world of you, and I feel hopeless and furious about what's happened. Your friend